If you show weakness and you're okay with pausing to process, and you might even ask me for advice, whoa, I can trust you. How can you trust them? Their life's a mess. Yes, but so is mine. And if they're okay with acknowledging how screwed up their life is in front of me, well, then it's a safe place for me to process my garbage with them. And that's someone that I would rather trust. I would rather trust someone than admire them on a stage. And I want to say that depth and spirituality and trust, these are not serious, heavy things. These are the source of joy and fulfillment and satisfaction. And I didn't want to say yes to letting Jesus be my leader and my Lord because I was afraid that he was going to take every good thing that I liked and every good relationship that I had, and he was going to force me to put it on the altar, get rid of it all, because he was going to make my nice, tidy, irrelevant religious life when I said yes to him. And that is the opposite of what has happened. He's taken almost every one of these relationships, these gifts, these talents, the resources, the experiences that I've had, and not only has he not gotten rid of most of them, I mean, sure, he's got to clean up some stuff, from some of our stupidity and poor choices that we made, and we probably shouldn't be hanging around with that dude anymore. Okay, I get that. There's a little bit of cleaning up that we all need to face. But he's taken all of those relationships, those resources, those gifts, those talents, those experiences, and he's repurposed them for something greater than I could have ever asked for or imagined, something bigger and better, more satisfying, more fulfilling than anything that my own strength, my own wisdom, my own creativity could have produced, more than any of my own attempts to be the center of attention. Once I laid those things on the altar, so to speak, and let him do what he would with them, he has fulfilled me with more satisfaction, fulfillment, and joy and purpose and passion than I've ever known. And right now in my life, I'm in the middle of experiencing more pain than I've ever known as well. And I'm just so thankful that he's rescued me at such a right time, because he's preparing me to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And Jesus doesn't just chase us down to those dark places when we're like, where the hell are you? He's down there waiting, because he's not a stranger to darkness and despair because of what he did for us. He knows, he can identify. And if we would just relinquish ourselves to the point where we let him embrace us and rebuild us, we can have passion in our pain. We can have joy even in our darkness, because joy is not dependent on what is happening. Happiness is dependent on happy things that are happening. Joy is something deeper because of the hope that I have, and the hope that I have in him will not disappoint.
This is Sparta!
Welcome back to Spartan Leadership. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick, and today we got a special one because I got someone live in the studio with me, and not only that, we get to smoke a great cigar together.
Come on now.
So let me introduce you to my new friend, Dave. We have the honor of hosting Dave Bechtold, a lifelong servant leader whose ministry is focused on the people of Madison, both inside and outside the church walls. Dave's story is a profound example of humility, service, and leadership, a true example of being uncommon among uncommon men. His ability to connect with people on their level and inspire them to grow spiritually and relationally is nothing short of inspiring. So today we're going to dive deep into Dave's journey, the events he's spearheading, and his vision for making Madison and its communities a better place. So we're all about that inspire and impact, as you all know. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. It's good to be in this space.
It's great to have you here. Yeah, it's been a minute since I've done a live leadership interview or conversation with a cigar, and a lot of mine have been virtual. We do our leadership and reviews once a month with Emmanuel, who I think you probably know from the Tasting Room.
He's cheering for us this week.
Yeah. So he and I smoke a cigar and do those live once a month. But Other than that, we haven't had a local leader in a bit, so I'm happy to have you here.
Well, I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be part of the gig.
Yeah. Chair comfortable?
The chair is comfortable.
Yeah.
Um,
These are great chairs. Sometimes I'll just come sit here to relax. They're a great find. But let's start with the journey. What led you to focus on ministry in Madison, both inside and outside the walls? Maybe a little bit of testimony in there.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Chicago, Chicagoland. Then a buddy of mine who was a former drug dealer here in Madison, God got a hold of his life, as he puts it, and he started a church in Madison, Wisconsin. And so we came up here in 1998 to help him start this church. And it was crazy. We didn't have a church building. We met in elementary schools and high schools, and it was just this ragtag fugitive fleet of humanity that just wandered in, hungover, strung out, but they wanted hope. They wanted to find God, and they loved the kick-ass band that was playing. And it was the only church I'd ever been to that actually had a smoking break between the band and the message. And it was just attractive to people because it was real. It wasn't religious and corny and pressured. It was come as you are, and here's Jesus. And so we came to be a part of that up here in Madison back in 98. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 25 years until a few years ago when the next transition took place.
So I got to ask, are you a Bears or Packers fan?
I am a Packers fan.
Interesting.
Here's the deal.
Did you switch?
I did not switch. I actually didn't become much of a football fan until I moved to Wisconsin, and then I became a fan of Packer fans because that was about the time when big screen plasma TVs were coming out, and I would just go for the parties, and I would see people throwing things at their television. I mean, it was the best food I've ever had in my life, screaming and shouting, crying and laughing, and I'm like, I like football. So I was won over.
That's interesting. So I came from Central Illinois.
Okay.
And moved here in 8th grade in 93. So I graduated in 98 when you were moving up here. And, my loyalties were tied to the Bears at that time and the rest of Chicago professional teams. So I switched over to the Badgers, but have remained loyal to my shitty Bears ever since. It's been a rough go with the Packers being pretty damn good every year for 30 years.
Yeah, well, congratulations on the win this year.
Yeah.
And then the
1-0 in 2025, baby.
Right, and we're what, 0-2?
Yeah,
in 2025.
There you go. Maybe the tides are turning. So let's talk possibly, because I love talking to spiritual leaders just outside. We talk to a lot of business leaders, and there's of course we'll get into some spiritual dialogue with those leaders. But was there a pivotal moment in your life, or where did you come to know Christ?
Yeah, I grew up. My dad was a pastor. I was kind of forced to go to church every Sunday. I didn't mind it. I just partied all week and would stumble into church and put on the smile, press my shirt, and impress everybody. I taught Sunday school. I just didn't want anyone else running my life. I wanted to run my life. I wanted to call the shots. I wanted to be the center of attention. And so as a young adult, that was a big hindrance to God having access to me because I believed in God. I'd say I loved God. I just didn't want him being in charge. I didn't want him being Lord. I wanted to be in charge. And, but everyone has their time at 3 a.m. when you're all alone and all of the stuff that you've been trying, experimenting with, looking to fill the spot, the space.
The void
to satisfy. It's like empty. And I was lonely, although everybody looked at me as the king of the hill, the life of the party. Uncle Dave was my tagline because I always knew where the action was and I could make stuff happen. And I loved that, except when I was alone. Then I realized how empty those things were when I was trying to be the center of attention. Then I met this girl who was this hippie chick. She had this green hair down past her waist. And I met her at a college orientation for this Christian college, and the band was playing. People were singing the songs that were on the screen, and she's over here with her eyes closed and this huge smile, her hands in the air, and she's like, having this conversation with God. And I'm just like, who is this? What is that all about? And I was moved. I mean, A, she was beautiful, but B, she had something deep and spiritual. And I'm like, I do not have that. I don't have anything near that. And I introduced myself to her, and she stiff-armed me because she just spotted me a mile away wanting to get some action or connect with her. She's like, nope, I'm following God. I don't need a guy in my life. And well, then I hung out with her long enough, and she had some patience and kindness to tell me very assertively that I got to get my stuff together, or I'm never going to have a shot at her. And she's like, you need Jesus to lead your life, because the way you're doing it is a train wreck.
Mm. So one could look at that and be like, well, then you accepted Jesus to get a girl.
Yeah, no, yeah, right. I could see that. And then well, yeah, that's a good point. That is,
I'm just trying to play the devil's advocate. I know it's not what happened,
yeah,
but
no, she's tough. She was not going to just accept some sissy, sign the paperwork, and then we're good to go. She wanted me to prove myself, and she's like, I like you, but I want to follow someone that I want to lead me. And right now, you don't have a track record that says you're someone that I want to follow. And so she actually helped me, coached me. Some would even say discipled me, like, is, it's a word, Jesus had disciples that were followers of him. She helped me follow Jesus to the point where she would let me lead her. I mean, it was awesome. Mm-hmm. She's a godly young lady. We've been married 30 years now, dude.
That's
her.
Awesome.
This is the one. Sarah is the one who rescued me. God used her with a pretty face to rescue me from my self-destructive patterns of isolation and pride.
Yeah.
Wow.
And my wife did the same for me.
All right.
What, why is this so important? You hit on something here, and it's really important to touch on. Why is it so important for the man to lead the household? And particularly, now Tasting Room's one of the nicest cigar lounges you'll go to. That being said, cigar lounges all over the country that I've been into, you get every socioeconomic class, every gender, every race, every religion, doesn't matter. And you're sitting down having some of the best conversations you'll have in your life because you're joining over a cigar that's going to last you an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And you're not moving. Right? You're going to smoke that thing.
You're in the most comfortable furniture you've been all year. You don't have a waiter or a waitress, trying to rush you out because someone's going to fill your table. You are there to lounge, and you light up a cigar, and you're looking at least an hour to just lounge. And people walk in that door, not necessarily to escape reality, but to process reality in a place where they're not alone. And there's a lot of community and camaraderie that takes place in the cigar culture. And yeah, everything that you said is true. And one of the reasons that I love spending a lot of time at the tasting room.
I'm seeing it a lot. I don't know if you've noticed this because I know you just said you became a football fan or at least a Packer fan. I'm seeing the NFL and college in particular, a lot of people not being afraid to talk about Jesus.
Yeah.
More especially this year, from the Boise State head coach, from some of the quarterbacks in the NFL. Actually that last game with the Packers and the Bears.
Yeah.
Jalen Johnson kneeling over Christian Watson and praying right on him.
Right there. Right on the field, yeah.
I'm seeing that more and more. It's like it's coming back where Christians have always been here. We're the predominant religion in the country, but we seem to be so beat down by the media and culture and, oh, don't say that because it's offensive. Don't say Jesus' name out loud because you might offend someone. And it's the pendulum seems to be swinging back where we're allowed to, or at least getting brave enough to speak our beliefs out loud.
I think there's so much hurt, so much confusion, so much fear in the world that people are going to take anything they can get that can offer some immediate help or lasting hope. And I mean, whatever spin you want to put on it, whatever name you want to put on it, faith, God, Jesus, they're just, like I said, there's a spiritual hunger because the barrenness and emptiness within us without God, that void that you were talking about that I was wrestling with back in my early days, that is legit and that is real. And at some point, we're going to have to come to grips with what is it going to take to fill that, because my life is pointless with that empty space that is gnawing at me. And I want to go back. You were talking about what I'm seeing in Madison. Well, so at the tasting room, I'm like, I would love to host an event here, off hours sometime. Then I look, the tasting room's never closed. So how do you do something off hours? Well, we decided, well, let's do something in the morning. And I wanted to have it be faith-based. And so we were going to call it Holy Smokes. Whatever it was, I didn't even know, but like a kind of a 60-minute.
Great name.
Yeah, Holy Smokes.
Alec, the marketing guy, is probably like, yeah, great job.
Alec is a good man. So I went to the manager and I said, I am interested in doing and experimenting with this. I said, I'm not even sure what it would look like, but I'm not asking you to advertise it for me, but could I rent this space? And I know that it's a big space. It's a nice space. It costs money to rent this, but I wanted to give it a shot. And so we opened up early on a Saturday morning. They opened up for us. We had bartenders there, and I kind of thought it might be me and 5 of my buddies, back on a few chairs, talking about faith and spirituality. Well, I got in there, and 30 people showed up, started pouring through the doors at like 9:30 on a Saturday morning, an hour and a half before the tasting room opens. And people are coming in, ordering Bloody Marys, lighting up cigars, sipping coffee, and the tasting room pulls out their speaker system and their microphone. They're like, well, I think it's a little bigger than you and a handful of guys sitting on the couch, and that sounds creepy in itself. But anyway, I'm thankful it wasn't that. So Holy Smokes was born. And I said, let's try a couple other ones if you guys are up for it. And then we'll just see, if this isn't working or if this isn't your jam or the owners are not a fan. I said, I really appreciate it. And they said, well, we want to do that. So now we do it every quarter at the tasting room. They open it up early for us. I have never been charged for the room. They staff the bar for us. There's been so much grace and favor. The owners are so generous and gracious and all about community, and creating relaxed, slow-paced environments for people to find help and hope in the middle of a crazy world. And that's why they made the tasting room. And we get to benefit from it. And every time we're there, for Holy Smokes, I mean, there's a ton of new people who've never even been to this place before, and introducing people to the culture of lounging and community. And so it's kind of a win-win, and it's awesome.
Yeah. No, that is a great thing. Actually, one thing I wanted to go back to from our initial conversation around the husband leading the house. I just recently read a study that talks about children and following Christ and the likelihood of them following Christ. If the woman is bringing in, the wife is, or mother is bringing the children to church and the husband is not a follower, they have less than a 20% chance. If the father is, it's inverse. It's over 80%.
Wow. I believe that.
Just crazy. I think, like, I would have never thought there would be that big of a disparity.
Yeah. Can I just initiate
Yeah.
something else? Someone asked me one time, what if I think there's a common bond that unites all people, and I kind of could tell he was getting at something, and I said, I don't know, love, our need for love. He's like, well, that's good, but I don't think it's the right answer. And so, okay, tell me what unites us. And he said, pain. And that didn't resonate with me until I started spending more and more time outside the church walls. A lot of times people will be a part of a church and we kind of mask our pain in the country club environment where everything's always good and praise the Lord and hallelujah and God bless you, brother. And the more time we spent outside the walls, having conversations with real people, living real life, experiencing real pain. And then I started to be in touch with my own pain, my own depression, anxiety, panic attacks, loss, struggles, selfishness, poor decisions, the results of regretful things that I've done. And I'm not saying that the church is not a healthy place for those things to be processed, but too few people process them openly. And they're processing them more freely in a coffee shop, at the dive bar down the road, and at the cigar lounge up the street. Because we all realize in those places how needy we are. We don't necessarily have the answers, but we can connect in our pain. And Jesus was drawn to pain. And so many people have given on church, but they have given up on church, but they haven't given up on God. And I think they're just longing to know that God hasn't given up on them.
Oh, no.
And when you're just there without being in a hurry and processing with people in their pain, in your pain, again, it's not like we're going to fix each other's problems, but we're going to make the statement that you're not going to be alone in your pain. We're here for each other. And I think that is such a wonderful thing that each one of us, every human, has the opportunity to do, is to be with someone in their pain.
Yeah. It's interesting to say that. So I'm in a Bible study nationwide. Almost all of us are entrepreneurs. And there's a lot of pain in growing a business. But there's also a lot of life pain that goes along with it. And we were just having a conversation, I think it was last week, just opening up about some of the stuff. A few people volunteered to open themselves up. One guy slipped up last year, hadn't watched any pornography in over a decade and slipped up last year. One guy's going through some family strife. One guy's got, a daughter that had an abortion and didn't tell him. In a Christian household, like there's a lot. And you talk about going to church on Sunday, and we all put on depending on which church, you put on your Sunday best, and you show up with this mask, and you're there for the same reasons, but you're not there with the same pain. But everyone has a pain, and like you said, they're not going to go and show or talk about or wait in the lobby of the church to look for someone to go, hey, I got this going on right now. But if we're sitting in a comfortable chair at the tasting room, and I'm able to look you in the eyes and say, hey, you know what? I think you could help me.
Dude, that is a huge opening way to be vulnerable in an approach to a conversation, is to ask someone for advice, to ask someone for help. It immediately says, I am less than you, and you have something that I desperately need, which is so different than the way I used to live my life, as like having it all together and let me meet your needs. Let me be the cool guy that you hang around. Well, that's kind of neat, but it's very shallow. And the older that I get, I just don't have tolerance for shallow. And deep does not need to be heavy and burdensome and stripped of joy. Dude, my life is the best I've ever had it. I am facing a lot of crap on many levels, and I do what I can to not let the depths of my pain squash my passion for people because I have let God have so much residence in me. Every day I want him in me to grow so that when people see me, they see Christ in me. And when they see something that's bigger than me, in me, they want to spend time with me because they want what's in me. It's like when I saw my wife, that hippie chick who was like dialed into a conversation with Jesus. And I'm like, what the heck is that all about? I want that. I need that. She was beautiful, but I was drawn to something deeper. And I believe that there is something deeper that God is longing for, and that's a relationship. It's not a religion. It's not a church service. It's not holy smokes. It's letting people know that he is alive. He is good. He loves us in our weakness, and we do not need to perform for him. The more we perform for him, the less we demonstrate our need for him. So the quicker we can come with all of our baggage and all of our broken, misfit puzzle pieces put on the table, the quicker he can respond and begin putting things back together. And I think he loves doing that through people, because that's where the rubber hits the road, when we are with each other in our pain, leading each other to something and someone that is greater than all of us.
Mm-hmm. You know, you brought up your wife a couple times in that regard. She was emanating this amazingness, right? Right,
Yep.
this spirituality. And I think back to my first Bible study. It was a couples group. You know, we belong to Black Hawk, and they do a great job of getting the Bible study groups together and kind of right-sizing for the place in life that you are. Right, so we were in a young couples group, all of us. It was prior to all of us having kids. We were young marrieds, and there was this woman in the group who just, very much like your wife, just had this smile and grace and just emanating love. And I think about her frequently, because it's people like that, when they're just so spiritually aligned and in love with Jesus, that like, it just makes them such a beautiful person, and it attracts others to them without them even trying. She wouldn't be someone that would go up on stage and be this you rah rah person. Just her being was attractive to God. And so the reason I bring this up is we all have that opportunity, but it's the more we pursue God's love and can get right with ourselves and spiritually aligned with him, that we become that magnet for others.
You said it. It really is. It's becoming the best version of ourselves in Christ, which allows us to give the best of who he is to our spouse, which has helped our marriage be stronger every year over the last 30 years, which has given something solid for our kids to model after, whether or not they choose to. Whatever they do in life, they will always know that there is another way. There is a better way. And consistency, humility, vulnerability, those were three things that I never had. I was very inconsistent. I would try to schmooze you up so that I could get a piece of that action, or I would be this to those people, or I would try to impress over here. It was exhausting trying to keep up with my inconsistencies and how I was trying to look as great as possible to everybody that I loved. You know, consistency, vulnerability, and humility. I didn't want to be vulnerable because that's a sign of weakness. But I'll tell you what I've learned as I've aged, if I can't trust somebody, I don't want to spend time with them. And here's how I know that I can't trust someone yet. If they always have an answer and they never show weakness. They think that always having an answer and always appearing strong is going to be attractive, and it is on a very surface level. But if you show weakness and you're okay with pausing to process, and you might even ask me for advice, whoa, I can trust you. How can you trust them? Their life's a mess. Yes, but so is mine. And if they're okay with acknowledging how screwed up their life is in front of me, well, then it's a safe place for me to process my garbage with them. And that's someone that I would rather trust. I would rather trust someone than admire them on a stage.
Yeah. Yeah, that's real. And most people don't recognize that arrogance is the outward display of inner lack of security. And the older you get and the more experience you have with people like that, you're like, I see it. I see through you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to say that depth and spirituality and trust, these are not serious, heavy things. These are the source of joy and fulfillment and satisfaction. And I didn't want to say yes to letting Jesus be my leader and my Lord because I was afraid that he was going to take every good thing that I liked and every good relationship that I had, and he was going to force me to put it on the altar, get rid of it all because he was going to make my nice, tidy, irrelevant religious life when I said yes to him. And that is the opposite of what has happened. He's taken almost every one of these relationships, these gifts, these talents, the resources, the experiences that I've had. And not only has he not gotten rid of most of them, I mean, sure, he's got to clean up some stuff, from some of our stupidity and poor choices that we made. And we probably shouldn't be hanging around with that dude anymore. Okay, I get that. There's a little bit of cleaning up that we all need to face. But he's taken all of those relationships, those resources, those gifts, those talents, those experiences, and he's repurposed them for something greater than I could have ever asked for or imagined, something bigger and better, more satisfying, more fulfilling than anything that my own strength, my own wisdom, my own creativity could have produced, more than any of my own attempts to be the center of attention. Once I laid those things on the altar, so to speak, and let him do what he would with them, he has fulfilled me with more satisfaction, fulfillment, and joy and purpose and passion than I've ever known. And right now in my life, I'm in the middle of experiencing more pain than I've ever known as well. And I'm just so thankful that he's rescued me at such a right time because he's preparing me to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And Jesus doesn't just chase us down to those dark places when we're like, where the hell are you? He's down there waiting because he's not a stranger to darkness and despair because of what he did for us. He knows, he can identify. And if we would just relinquish ourselves to the point where we let him embrace us and rebuild us, we can have passion in our pain. We can have joy even in our darkness, because joy is not dependent on what is happening. Happiness is dependent on happy things that are happening. Joy is something deeper because of the hope that I have, and the hope that I have in him will not disappoint.
Mm.
Wow.
Amen.
Yeah.
So I recently read The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Heard of that.
It's a great book written by a former megachurch pastor out in Portland area. So kind of like Madison, uber liberal, but he has some great points in there. And really the context of the book is following Jesus as a leader. So regardless of whether people believe, you and I, that Jesus was our Savior, I believe he was the greatest leader of all time. And history would show that. The reason it gets, construed or misconstrued, I should say, nowadays is because he is tied to a religion. Others don't necessarily follow him or think of his name like they do of, say, Gandhi.
Sure.
But he's the greatest leader of all time. And so he takes this context of saying that nothing Jesus did was in a hurry. It was deliberate, but it wasn't in a hurry. And there are some things I don't necessarily agree with in the book. Like he told me to try driving the speed limit one day. And I was like, nope, not going to do that. I might try some of his other suggestions to get my life to slow down. But in this day and age, everything is in a hurry, and I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do the to-do list, all the different things. Got to pick up the kids, got to get this job done, got to do this at home. And he's like, remember, everything Jesus did was deliberate, but he was never in a rush. So I was thinking about this for a question. You talked about earlier, and I've been I'll be vulnerable and say that I've been at this point in my life as well, where I never not believed, but I certainly didn't follow. Kind of like you were describing your early days.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to be a follower and not just a believer? Because I think there's a lot of days, or a lot of people in the U.S. that say they believe, but they're not truly following.
Yeah. Following someone is wanting to be like them. I want to be like my dad. My dad is consistent. My dad is humble. My dad has never told me to be like him. But the more I've watched him, the more I've seen the fruit of his life, the more I follow him by wanting to be like him and by pursuing being like him. And that's how it is for me with Jesus. People want to nickel and dime little verses in the Bible. Well, that doesn't make sense, or that was cultural for in the day, and that's totally different now. And, if Moses would have been alive today, he would have said this. And it's like, okay, I'm not smart enough to nickel and dime all of these little theological idiosyncrasies. But Jesus is my goal. And people might have a problem with church. They might have a problem with the Bible being an outdated book. They might have a problem with how pastors and Christian leaders do stupid things and drive too many, private jets and whatever. I don't need to talk about those things, but when I bring up Jesus, people are open. Oh yeah, Jesus. Whether he was just a good leader, whether he was a good man, nobody's denying that Jesus existed. And people aren't denying what actually happened with him. And so my pursuit of Jesus involves me pursuing becoming like him. The relentless pursuit of hurry. Jesus was the latest person who was always on time. And it's not always what I think and when I think. But trusting him like I trust my dad, I want to live my life in such a way that when people want to know what's in me, I can introduce them to Jesus. And when they get to know Jesus and read about Jesus in the scriptures and become enamored with the wonderful Son of God in human form that he was and is, they're like, it's kind of like my buddy Dave from the tasting room. That I believe that we have the opportunity to provide, it's in the scripture that we can provide a fragrant aroma to the Lord by the way we live our lives. And I'll tell you what, if there is even 1 second of my life that something that I did or the motive of my heart was pure enough to make God smile and to be a pleasing aroma to him, even for one of his inhales, my whole life would have been worth living, because it is such an honor to know that I am created by someone who longs to be in a relationship with me. And he gave his son to be killed by people like me, to not only show us the way to God, but to become the way to God. Mm-hmm. And Jesus came to do what I couldn't do on my own. And left to my own devices, I would have destined to spend eternity apart from God. in darkness and pain. And that's the only way I can describe what eternity apart from God would look like. And only a fool with that data would make that decision. And I was tired of being the fool.
Yeah, I've gotten in conversations with atheist friends, and they're all very smart. Maybe too smart for their own good. And I don't try and argue or change their opinion. I just share what I believe. Because I think I've seen too many Christians get into that argument, and they'll beat you down because they are very smart. Because we're acting on faith, they're acting on facts. And I just leave the conversation like this. I say, I respect you. I love you. We're still going to be friends. I just want to leave you with this. If you're right, we end up in the same spot. We're both in the ground decaying. And I chose to live a life of love and following someone that's a far greater leader than me. If I'm right and you're wrong, you're screwed. And as a friend, I'd rather spend all of eternity with you than not.
Wow. I love the way that you choose to not put the heat on or the pressure on. You're not giving a persuasive speech. Our life should be our persuasive speech. Letting people know by the way that we live our life and by the way that we respond to pain that God is alive and that He is good and He is for us, not against us. And a lot of people are far from God. But if there are any followers of Jesus listening right now, a lot of people are far from God, but they're not far from you. And you are going to meet people that I will never know. And you know people that Josh and I are never going to meet. Please don't squander the stewardship of those relationships. Press into God, become more like Jesus so that you can represent Him. We get to represent Him. We get to represent Jesus. Oh my goodness, He's trusting us knuckleheads, with this wonderful, beautiful, glorious responsibility and opportunity to live a life in the midst of pain that's filled with passion and purpose, so that we can give it away to people, so that He can give Jesus away to this world through normal, everyday knuckleheads like you and me. I love that spiritual economy because it doesn't require a lot from me other than a clean slate and an open heart. And that's all I want to give to Him and to others. And I think we all have the opportunity to do the same.
Yeah. In fact, someone said this to me a long time ago, and it's been so long I can't give credit to who said it, but I've used it often now. You talked about, the church pushing people away at times, whether it's the Catholic Church or other churches, because they were, say the leader of the church taking out of context Bible verses, prosperity gospel, whatever it may be. Guilt and shame in the Catholic Church, we've heard often. But here's the deal, that the responsibility that you were just talking about. Someone said this: you may be the only example of a Christian someone sees or ever gets to experience. So be a good one.
Hear, hear.
And that's stuck with me to this day.
Yeah, we have an opportunity, but we also have a responsibility. And one of the most beautiful things is when we are in desperate need ourselves and we give to someone else out of our own need. I might be desperately behind on bills, but yet I see someone whose need is greater than me, and I give them something when I need something myself, but they are blessed in a way that I could not have anticipated at a timing that was perfect for them. And in that moment that didn't make sense economically to give money away when I needed money myself, my heart and mind was changed because I saw that I could still be a blessing to them in their need while I was still sitting in my need. Maybe I'm in desperate need for a word of wise counsel or a word from the Lord or whatever, and I'm just like in such a purposeless season of life. But yet I meet someone at the coffee shop and they're sitting here and they've got it worse off than I do. And I feel like I'm supposed to give them a timely word of wisdom and counsel.
Or kindness.
Or kindness, doggone it. It doesn't take a lot. And in that moment when I give away out of my emotional bankruptcy, oh my goodness, because God is alive and good and longing for us, in that moment there's this fusion that recalibrates my own thought process to get out of my own pit of despair and see that I still have something to give because Christ in me is better than me in me. And I love watching people give out of their own bankruptcy, so to speak, because we all have something to give, even when we're at the bottom of the barrel.
Man, that's absolutely true and so good. So the two last questions. One, I was just wondering, because you've worked with such a diverse group of people, and you've been a part of a church and outside the church for what, 30 years?
Yeah.
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 Has there been a profound moment that you've just seen that's just with someone else that you're just like, wow, nothing other than God?
Well, there have been so many little things that are not little to him, but we were nearly bankrupt ourselves financially. We had our car in the shop. We had one vehicle, our 4 kids. We were at the breakfast table and we're praying because we couldn't pick up our vehicle because we had maxed out the credit card and we owed $600 to pick up our vehicle, and they wouldn't let us pick it up until we paid for it. And so we gathered the kids at the breakfast table before school one day to pray. I figured, hey, if we get the kids involved in praying, maybe that'll kind of twist God's arm or something about it. Then they all went to school. We went to work. That night at dinner, all of our children are at the table again. And there was literally a knock at the door. And I go to the door while we're eating dinner. It's a guy I haven't seen in a long time. He didn't want to come in. He just said, hey, I just made this sale. And as I was taking my commission to the bank, I just sensed that I needed to bring it over here. So he hands me an envelope. He's like, hey, this is for you. God bless you. So anyway, within 20 seconds, I'm back at the dinner table and, who was that? And I said, so-and-so, he gave me this envelope and open it. And I opened the envelope and there was $600 in cash. So if you have kids, get them on the prayer chain with you because doggone it works. But I'll tell you what, we have had many things like that take place. And if God can provide that specifically, he can part the Red Sea. He can give you help and hope in the middle of your darkest despair. I've watched it in people who I'm in the conversations with 3 atheists who will not leave me alone, but they no longer torment me. They are inquisitive. How can this be true? They're asking questions about their own lack of faith, couched in accusations about how I can believe this. And I'm getting messages from them on the side that say, I have never seen such a consistent witness of simple faith. And it drives me crazy that you do not engage in all of my intellectual debates. But you have something that I don't. And I want you to know that I'm cheering for you. And who knows? Perhaps someday I may even join you on the journey.
Mm.
And that's not because I gave a persuasive speech. It's because I've chosen to live a life with those three things: consistency, humility, and vulnerability. And that is not what people think of when they think of a strong leader. Vulnerability, humility, you're never going to get far. I might not get far in some ways that might be more important to some people. But I am satisfied in my soul. And I know where I'm going. And I know that my life is on the altar for the Lord to do whatever he wants to do in me and through me. So 3 years ago, when I left my day job as a pastor, we sensed that my wife and I sensed that I was supposed to resign. And we had no idea why or what was going to take place on the other side of that. But we jumped off that cliff together. And we ended up starting this outside the walls nonprofit, because this describes what we do. We take faith outside the walls. We host spiritual events in secular venues all over Madison, outside the walls of the church. And we're not saying the church isn't going to help. And I'm not starting a church. I'm just spreading hope, joy, and love and Jesus outside the walls of the church. And that's what we're doing. We have never missed a payment. We've gotten out of debt since I quit my job. I left 2/3 of our family's income, and we have never missed a bill. We've replaced a furnace. We just got a new vehicle. We are going on vacation. God is a very tangible provider. Well, how's all that happening? What do you got? Stocks that we don't know about? No. There have been people who are coming up to us and they're saying, I don't have the energy or the vision that you have, but doggone it, I want what you're doing taking place in my city. And you know what? My wife and I, we got money. How can we help? How can we help so that you don't have to get a job at Menards? You know, we want you to have as much time as you can to continue saying yes, what God has set you guys apart to do. And so people are joining us on board that we weren't even asking for, helping us set up a website that we didn't even know we needed, helping us set up a 501c3 nonprofit status so that more people can fund the good things that are taking place and the dreams and visions of things that are yet to come. These are things like you were talking about earlier, how, we know what we're good at and we know what we're not good at. And there's a lot of things that I'm not good at. But I believe God is sending the right people alongside of us to partner with us in unique and specific ways to take what he's set us apart to do and make it great for his name's sake.
Amen. How can people support Outside the Walls?
Well, this magical website that I was just mentioning is outsidethewalls.co. We couldn't afford the com, so it's outsidethewall.co. And that's just a little taste of what we do, why we do it, where our events are, why we do these events, testimonies, what people are saying, opportunities to give, and support if you wish. So that is something that if you believe in what's happening, if you are inspired by what you're hearing here, if you want to take a vision that maybe the Lord has whispered in you a long time ago, or just some creative ideas that you've just been journaling about or documenting, but you never think they're going to become anything real in your lifetime, I want to say it's time to dream again, and it's time to resurrect the dreams that have been lost within you and you can do something great, because people on this planet desperately need what you have been put here to bring. So if you want to be inspired and you want to help us continue to inspire people to reproduce Jesus in the earth in very simple and effective ways outside the walls of the church building, boy, then give a lot and do something yourself and let me know how I can give back to you.
That's awesome. So I always end with this question. It could be on something we've spoken of or something that's just on your heart. But what is an unpopular belief you hold to be true that you think most would disagree with?
I'm going to repeat the question as a stalling mechanism. Unpopular belief that I have.
A hill you'd die on, you think most people would disagree with you on?
Trying to think of something that's not going to spoil everything people just listen to. Well, this is it's good to know that we can edit out the pauses here. Huh. I believe regarding marriage that counseling for your marriage should not be reserved for people whose marriage seems to be falling apart. I think counseling is so important, but it's just gotten this negative stigma. It's actually coming back around, which I like. I mean, therapy is a big deal these days, and I appreciate that. But we all need wise counsel from people who are objective, people who are more experienced and wise than we are, particularly in marriage. People say, well, it's easy for you to say. You and Sarah have a great marriage. You're going on 30 years here, and this is great. I said, we have a great marriage because we've sought marriage counseling over the years when we need it. When we have something that we cannot figure out on our own, when we have a conversation that we cannot continue to have without one of us just marching out of the room or one of us just flaring up, we need that third party counseling. So wise counsel is highly underrated, especially when it comes to marriage. And marriages are just being ripped apart, and people are becoming so self-consumed, which is leading to the destruction of so many marriages, and marriage is so important to God. So the bottom line answer to that question, if this is what wants to stay in the recording, is marriage counseling is critical for every couple who is married, whether you think you need counseling or not.
Well, I think I agree with you, because it should be preemptive instead of a last resort. That's what people see it as a last resort. Well, we're going to go to counseling now because we're going to try and save this thing. Well, perhaps you wouldn't try to or have to try and save it if you had done what you're suggesting.
Yes. So seek counsel before you need counsel, and just establish your marriage with building blocks that are true and right and good and eternal. And let people know that you're going in for counseling. It's part of the consistency, vulnerability, humility package. It lets people know, and it reminds yourself that you're just not that big of a deal. We are like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Christmas special. We're on the island of misfit toys. We're all misfits, and we all need help. So get the help before you need it. Get the help when you need it. Get the help so that you can be equipped to maybe even help others with the way you've received help yourself.
That's awesome. This has been such a great conversation. You've certainly led with vulnerability and humility and love of Jesus. So all of that came through today. It's been awesome.
Well, thank you for making this a conversation, not an interview. Thank you for your affirming comments and the space that you've given this conversation and my random monologues to breathe. That means a lot to me.
Well, it's the random monologues, frankly, are what people need, because we're both human. A lot of times when you get on a pulpit, a stage, or behind a microphone, people have this inherent belief that you're holier than thou. And the reality is we're all walking this human experience together. And none of us are perfect. There was only one person that's ever walked this earth that was, and that's Jesus. And we're just trying to follow his lead.
I concur. Josh, thanks again.
You're very welcome, brother. Hey, Spartans, you know what to do. Share this episode far and wide. Check out, what's the website again?
OutsideTheWalls.co.
OutsideTheWalls.co. I did not want to screw that up and have you go somewhere else. So, OutsideTheWalls.co, if you're looking to support his great mission, that would be awesome and be greatly appreciated. Remember that good and great are the enemies of possible. Lead like a Spartan today. And we're off.
This is Sparta!